Hi, good morning, Zev. We're back to Mishnayos of Avodah Zarah, Perek Daled, Mishnah Hey. In the last Mishnah, we learned that Oived Kachovim Mevatel Avodah Zarah Sheloim Shel Chaveroi, that a non-Jewish idolater can nullify, could be Mevatel, both his own Avodah Zarah, both his own idol, as well as that of his fellow non-Jewish worshipper, idol worshipper. In other words, an Ovid Kachovim is able to be mevatel Avodah Zarah. He can nullify it, can do away with it. He can make it null and void. So now the question is in Mishnah Hey, what are the ways by which an Ovid Avodah Zarah can be mevatel his Avodah Zarah? Says the Mishnah, Ketzad mevatla. How does a non-Jewish idolater nullify the idol, the Getchke that he's worshiping? So the Mishnah gives us a number of ways. Number one, kata roish oizna. If he cut off the tip of its ear. Roish choitma. Or he cut off the tip of its nose. Or roish etzbo. He cut off the tip of its finger, even though he left the rest of the idol intact. Pechosa afal pishaloichisa. Or if he flattened its face with a hammer, he gave a good zet on the face of the idol, even though he did not remove anything from it per se. In other words, he battered the face of a metal idol with a hammer until he destroyed its facial features, even though none of the actual material of the idol fell off. None of the actual material fell off. Still in all, says the Mishnah, Bitla, he has nullified it. Why is that? Because in all of these cases, he has shown that he no longer considers this idol to be a god, to be something worthy of worship. And it therefore becomes mutar behano. It therefore becomes permissible to benefit from. If, on the other hand, rokak befanea, he merely spit in front of it, hishtin befanea, he urinated in front of it, gerera, he dragged it through the mud, zorag boitzatzoya, he threw excrement at it. Now, all of these things really don't sound very nice, but arei zu eina betela. Then the idol is not nullified. Why is that? Even though at first glance we realize and we understand that these acts also show a lack of belief, a lack of respect. Yet, they may just be the result of temporary anger, a temporary outburst of anger at the idol for not having helped him, for not having come through, so to speak. But when that fit of anger passes, the idolater will once again worship the idol, could very well be. And therefore, only an act that causes permanent damage is considered a bitul, is considered a nullification. Now says the Mishnah, Mechora, he sold the idol. Oy mishkena, he gave it to someone as security for a loan. In other words, he borrowed money from someone and gave him the idol to hold and keep if he does not pay back the loan. He gave it as a mashkoy. He gave it as a collateral. So mechora, he sold it or he gave it as a collateral. Rebbe Omer Bitel. Rebbe says that he nullified it, that he actually did a Maaseh Bitul by doing that, by selling or giving it as a collateral, since he shows his lack of belief in the idol by giving it away for money. By giving it away for money. Now, to add here that Rebbe speaks of a case where the loan has come due and the lender may now keep the idol if the idolater does not pay up. The loan is due, and the idolater can keep the idol because the fellow didn't pay up. Now, since the idolater makes no effort to redeem it, it is as if he sold it. If he sold it, don't need it, out of here. I better have the money. I'd rather get the money. That's Rebbe Shita. The Chachamim Oimrim, and the Chachamim say, Loi bitel. No, selling it or giving it as a collateral does not show necessarily that he was mevatel it. Loi bitel, the Chachamim say. He has not nullified it. Why? Because he gave it away only because he needs the money. And he thinks that the idol will still be worshipped by the person who ends up with it. And therefore, Rashi explains in the Gemara that according to the Chachamim, the idolater assumes that the buyer or the lender will continue to worship this idol, or at least sell it to someone who will worship it. And therefore, the Chachamim say that his actions therefore do not show that he no longer believes in it. However, Fashtetzach, the Meforshim say that if the idolater sold or gave the idol to a Jewish smith, and that Jewish smith buys metal objects to melt them down and then produce new things out of them, then he knows that the Jew is not going to worship it. He knows that this idol will no longer be worshipped. And he assumes that the Jewish smith will melt it down to use the metal for other purposes, for other things that he's going to create. So in this case, the Meforshim explain that the Chachamim also agree that he nullified the idol by giving it to a Jewish smith. He nullified it by giving it to a Jewish smith. Look at the end of the Rav that begins with the heading of Rebbe Omer Betela, says the Rav, Aval mechora leYisrael tzoyref, but if he sold it to a Jewish smith, divrei hakol betela, everyone agrees that it's batel. Ve'alocha kechachomim. Okay, Mishnah Vav. The Mishnah continues to discuss this Indian, this halacha of nullification of being mevatel idols. Says the Mishnah, Avodah Zarah shenichu avdeya, an idol whose worshippers abandoned it, which means they left it, they moved away, they left it behind, and they don't plan to return. They left it behind with no plans to return. Says the Mishnah, Bishas Sholem Muteres. If this happened during peacetime, so the idol is permissible behando, the idol is mutar behando, because the fact that they didn't take it with them and they were able to, it's peacetime, proves that they no longer believe in it, proves that they no longer need it, mevatel it, who cares? This is considered nullification. Even though they did not do anything to the idol itself. They didn't teshmeter it, they didn't cut off a finger, they didn't cut off a nose. The Rav says it nicely, Bishas Sholem Muteres, oil v'yotzu ledas, because they left knowingly, consciously, They weren't forced to leave. Velon and they didn't take it with them. So that is enough of a statement, so to speak, that it's mevuto. But bishas milchama asura. But if this happened, the idol was left behind in the time of war, in the time of chaos, so then it still continues to be also behano, because they very well may have left it behind in a panic, to flee, to run away. It's a time of war. And therefore the Meiri explains that if they later had an opportunity to return and take it back, and they did not, then the abandoned idol again becomes mevutal, becomes nullified, and is permissible, and is mutar behano. And then the Mishnah discusses one other aspect, one other law regarding bitul or not. Bimosyoos, bimosyoos, bimosyoos shel melochim arei elu mutoros. Bimosyoos are pedestals. Pedestals that were set up in honor of the king are permissible, are mutar behano, even though there are idols placed upon them. Why is that? Because these idols are placed on these pedestals only on those very special occasions when the king or when the kings pass by town. And since these pedestals are not used for idols regularly, they're not in the service of the idol, so to speak, but only when the king travels, and the king sometimes takes a different road and bypasses these places, and he doesn't show up. The point is that the pedestals are not considered permanent basis to serve an idol. They're not considered part of the Mishamshei Avodah Zarah. Now, explain just a little bit more, is that these bimosyoes are carved stones, and they were placed along the route when the king was expected, were placed along the route that the king was expected to take on his passing through town. Now, when the king traveled, the priests would then mount these idols upon these pedestals so that they would stop, so that the king would stop and bow down to them as he passed. That's what the Rav explains. So the Mishnah teaches that these stones are permissible, behano, are mutar behano, and are not osur. They're not also as mishamshei avodah zarah, as things used to serve the idols for the reason explained.